The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Monday. It is April 13th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me. I won't be facilitating the entire show today. I'm just honestly trying to see how I feel. I figured the best way to see if my vocal rest is working is to test it out a little bit and try some new best practices that were given to me by some vocal coaches in terms of preserving my voice. But I do want to introduce two voices that you will hear today. I have two voicemails, but I also have two clips. One is from Q. Q is a gentleman that I had on my show a couple of times, the young cat, young revolutionary. He's got some things to say. He's filling in for me today, as well as Brian Lewis of Black and Intellectual. He had some thoughts on Bernie Sanders dropping out. That on top of two voicemails, I think it's going to make for a pretty good show. So I will start by saying I'm not going to talk long. I will start off by saying that I think one of the things that's going to be the most fascinating is going to be to watch Joe Biden supporters as they figure out this whole election thing. And what I mean is that there is a huge enthusiasm gap between Bernie Sanders and between what Bernie Sanders had and what Joe Biden has. The one thing people can't take away from this movement was the amount of effort and energy and resources that were poured into this. And I know a lot of people look at that kind of and say, well, that's frustrating because we lost. Well, not exactly. I would say that it's frustrating, yes, but it really shows what the left is capable of. The number of phone calls that were made, the number of text messages that were sent, the number of doors that were knocked on, all just really before Iowa. Certainly by South Carolina, it was absolutely groundbreaking. And I think one of the things that that Joe Biden is not going to have, the number one thing that Joe Biden is not going to have is the excitement. He is not going to have the excitement and the energy of people going to make phone calls. And nobody's going to knock on doors. Nobody's going to door-to-door canvass during this pandemic, right? So we can forget about that, setting that aside. But just the basics of picking up the phone call and calling people and see if they're going to support your candidate. They're not going to have that enthusiasm, as evidenced by what we saw on Twitter yesterday. And I think this is the best approach. If you want to deal with people who are attacking Bernie Sanders supporters, I mean, they're sore winners at this point. They want to beat everyone into subjection, partly because it's twofold. Number one, the Democratic establishment, the people, the consulting class, the blue check mark Twitter folks, they hate that there is a leftist movement that has coalesced that is completely separate from their financial incentives, their career paths, their political control. They can't control us. They don't pay our bills. Therefore, we don't answer to them and we give them the middle finger. And if you're like me, you may have answered to some of them at some time and you gave them the middle finger anyway. So they are frustrated. This is why they're so bitter, even in their victory. It's because they ultimately realize they cannot control the left. And I say the left because it's not Bernie Sanders' movement, right? We rally behind Bernie Sanders because he rallied behind us, period. That's the entire conversation. That's the first thing. So they're frustrated because they can't control us with their financial incentives because they don't pay our bills. They will hang a carrot out in front of you and never let you get it. That's why they keep threatening Brianna Joy Gray with, you got to worry about your career. You got to worry about your career. No, Bree doesn't have to worry about her career. Bree is going to be just fine. And if no one else makes sure that she's going to be fine, we will. Right. All she has to do is open up a Patreon account, and I'm quite sure she will have enough resources to pay her bills at any moment. And that's freedom. That's independence. We're separate from them. We don't have to answer to them because we don't need their money. That's the number one thing that we got from this is we organized enough so that voices who put themselves out there, people who put themselves in harm's way, socially speaking, we have been benefited by the masses, like my patrons. The reason I say what I want to say on Twitter as well as on the show is because the only people I really have to answer to is my patrons. And my patrons, we all know we have this relationship where ultimately I will listen to them, but I'm not going to dance for them either. There's a level of independence that we have that the Democratic establishment hates because that means they can't control us. That's why they're bitter. Then number two, the reason they're so bitter is because they need us. They hate that they need us. Because who's going to do the work? I mean, don't get me wrong. We're not going to do the work for them. We're not going to canvass for Joe Biden. We're not going to make phone calls for Joe Biden. Are they crazy? It's difficult. Think about how hard it was for you to make phone calls. It was nerve-wracking. You were nervous, but you did it anyway because you believed in the movement. Now, do you believe anyone is going to do that for Joe Biden? No. But they need us to because they're not going to do it. If you look at the responses that I posted, that we posted yesterday on Twitter, they don't even know what phone banking is. So the real question is like, or not the real question, but the real point to elucidate is the fact that all of these people who were talking about Joe Biden having a real campaign and having real electability and Bernie Sanders only being Bernie bros on Twitter and not really winning elections. The truth of the matter is that Bernie supporters, people on the left who were fighting for the marginalized communities, we were doing the work. You were doing the work. You were going across this country canvassing. You were going across this country knocking on doors. I mean, investing your own money. If you couldn't go, you poured into a GoFundMe to send someone else to go knock on doors. And they did that. And they made phone calls and they sent text messages because they believed in the movement. And nobody's going to do that for Joe Biden. They don't even know what it is. Quite literally, you have people, if you ask people on Twitter today, I know my tone is a little different, guys. I don't know. I don't even know how I sound at this point. I'm really just testing out my voice, taking it out for a stretch. So far it's decent. I normally at this point I would feel some pain. But at this point I can just tell I'm having some anxiety over whether or not there's going to be pain. And that anxiety is triggering some sensations of pain. But anyway, I digress. But they don't even know what phone banking is. Hang on. I got to make sure I got to do my voice right. They don't even know what phone banking is. And then when you tell them what it is, the responses that we're seeing overwhelmingly are like, oh no, I'm never going to do that. I'll just pay someone else to do that. So even if they replicate the number of phone calls that Bernie Sanders' team made or volunteers, the leftist progressive movement made before Iowa, they're going to have to pay tens of millions of dollars for what we volunteered to do. So they're frustrated because now they realize they've I don't know the saying. There's a saying. It reminds me of the Joker. It's like a dog chasing a truck. If you ever catch it, you don't know what you're going to do. And that's where they are. They've got the nomination pretty much wrapped up and they don't know what to do because they don't have. Ultimately, the people who really put in the work, the people who really were about the electioneering, right? Going out and actually doing what it takes, talking to people. Those are the supporters of Bernie Sanders. Those are the leftist supporters of Bernie Sanders. You're not going to get that from Joe Biden's crowd. And they're furious about that because they realize that. And so they're trying to preemptively blame the leftists because because these young movements are saying that they're not going to endorse Bernie Sanders. I mean, they're not going to endorse Joe Biden. Of course, socialist movements aren't going to endorse a man who hates socialism. And so they're expending all their energy on Twitter, trying to lecture everyone into submission to go and do the work that they don't want to do themselves. So they're furious. And there was another reason, but it escapes me. But the main point that I want to point out to you is that we have something. We have something here. We have a movement. It doesn't die with Bernie Sanders. Matter of fact, it didn't start with Bernie Sanders. Now, you got to give props where props is due. Bernie Sanders helped coalesce it. I mean, it's important. In a way, we sort of still need Sanders to stay in the mix. We still need that coalescing voice, but the movement existed before Bernie and it's going to exist after Bernie. And if we take the same energy And don't get me wrong, I know that energy was coalesced around or did coalesce around an individual. But if we just remind ourselves of what we did so y'all knocked on so many doors. You made so many phone calls that Barack Obama had to get off of his pantheon, come down. He had to, I like to use this type of language. He had to come down from the pantheon of the elite and step in to intervene on behalf of the centrists and the moderates. That's how effective you were. Okay, I think I'm hitting my limit. All right, that's all I'm going to do for today. Up next is going to be Q. Check him out, and then after that, you're going to hear from Brian Lewis of Black and Intellectual. I thank both of these gentlemen for sending me content, and then you'll hear a voicemail at the end. If you want to leave a voicemail, you can call 857-600-0518. I will be glad to put your voice on the air throughout the week. Thanks so much, everybody. And here's to the rest of the show.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Well, I do want to acknowledge our patrons. I don't have enough voice to thank all of you at this moment, but I do see you, and I will get your name shouted out on air before this is all said and done. So thanks to everyone who's a new patron, and everyone else, go to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you will get, well, this week you're only going to get the 30-minute show, but you will be able to listen to that show without any commercials like you're going to hear right here.
I want to thank everybody for listening. This is Q. Q got no rings. You are now tuned in to some real Black revolutionary radio. You feel me? No, I'm joking. We're here to just talk today about the world, hope, revolutionary optimism of some sort, and maybe just, I can ramble for a second. Point number one I want to get on is I wanted to say that Bernie Sanders suspending his operation, if you've seen my tweets, I'm not even going to get into it like that. I'm not even going to go all the way in. I'm not even going to do that on Bernie. I've done enough. I've said enough. The supporters are already wallowing in their own anguish. I can't do anything to make them feel even worse than they already do. So, and why would I? You know what I mean? Like, I take no pride in seeing suffering of people who want people to have good things. You know what I mean? And it's not that. It's more so seeing Bernie suspend his operation should be a wake-up call. That's what I want the biggest takeaway to be. I'm jumping right into it. I'm sorry if I'm not getting the proper introductions and whatnot. But Bernie Sanders losing for the second time should be a wake-up call that social democracy on stolen land is very much so, if not a pipe dream, something that the current left is not willing. And by left, I mean the mainstream white left that leaves out Black revolutionaries, that leaves out Black socialists, that leaves out Black organizers. I don't purport to be an organizer. I don't purport to be a revolutionary. I purport myself to be somebody who cares about the people and is willing to do whatever it takes. That's what I am. And I'm doing whatever I can, where I can, how I can. And that's all I think that people should take away from this, is that that's what it's going to take from all of us. Bernie was never your savior. Bernie was never your golden goose to take you to freedom. He was never going to be your mountaintop. And I know a lot of people are listening like, oh, we knew he wasn't going to be the mountaintop. He was just our movement leader. Or, oh, I was hoping he was going to win. Well, we can't hope that a system of death is going to go against the centuries-long business plan that it's been laying out for itself. I need people to understand that the very reason we are in this situation is because workers do not understand the stakes. We've been propagandized. The constituency has been propagandized to the core. There's a generation of people who are always willing to come out for the Joe Bidens because they've been propagandized to buy into my piece of the American pie is set. Well, now both parties then ate everyone's pie, because this bailout is nothing but capitalism at its most naked form. People often say socialism or barbarism. This is barbarism. Speaking directly to my black folks for a second, the black Bernie supporters and all the black folks who were even sentimental towards Bernie's platform, we gonna have to turn up. Simple and plain. I don't know what that necessarily means. I know that it entails striking. I know that it entails a rhetorical war, for one, on the black mislead leadership class. I know that it means showing up for our incarcerated folks. I know it means not turning our back on those from the hood. I know it means that using middle class privileges to help those less fortunate than you, and actually a commitment to the community that you might not be from, but that's still your community. You see what I'm saying? And in a larger context, to all black people, to all my Africans listening, to all my black people listening, and wherever you may lay your head on the globe, it's going to take us putting all that petty diaspora war bullshit aside for a second, because social democracy has failed in America. It's not happening here. And I know a lot of you in the third world will probably be like, duh, we knew. And trust me, all the black socialists, we've been trying to get, the black radical liberals and the black, progressives on the same page to understand that imperialism is just as much a fight as the fight against capitalism. This is a global struggle that we are going to have to engage in. Because while we may couch this in just a Bernie Sanders loss, and we can be very, very domestic and only think about the American collateral damage, or whatever the word I'm looking for is, the American reverberations around the world from this, what the outcomes and what the residual effects of this is going to do to the globe, right? Because, things that happen in America, they do affect everywhere else. It just has to be like that when you are the imperial core. You see what I'm saying? So Bernie losing, Bernie was still an imperialist. I need everyone to understand that. All my black folks, we are our own saviors. We are the saviors that we are looking for. It is our unity. It is going to be our strength. It is going to be our study. It is going to be our organizing. It is going to be our sweat, blood, and tears that is going to free us. It is never going to be a white politician. It is never going to be a politician from Chicago who lies to us for 8 years. It is never going to be a white politician who plays saxophone. It is never going to be anybody who goes into that system in Washington, D.C., because that is a system of death, that is a system of deprivation, that is a system of rape, that is a system of pillage, that is a system of disgust. That is the swamp that Trump talked about draining. For a reason. I need people to understand that there is one party in America. We have one imperialist party. This is just my perspective. If you have a disagreement, then by all means, you can wait for Ben to come back. I know I might be a little bit too hot sauce for people. Some people like their wings mild, but we are in very, very, very dark times. But there's reason to move with urgency rather than to be paralyzed by the fear of inaction. That is just not an option. It's not an option for us to sit in our mourning for these politicians. It is not an option. Now I'm speaking to everybody again. This now everyone can come back now. So this is the problem. These politicians are never going to save us. These politicians are never going to aid us. These politicians are all Anakins, and when they go to DC, they get inducted into the Sith. It doesn't matter whether they think they're a Jedi or not. Does that make sense? So Bernie, you may think you're Obi-Wan, you're still an Anakin. Cortez, she may think she's Obi-Wan, she's an Anakin too. Whether she believes it or not, whether she knows it or not, because it is a systemic evil that forces even the most fierce warriors who were, in the community and in their organizing and in, actual grassroots movements and were elected by, their constituents. They can even bend those people to their will. They can make them vote for Nancy Pelosi Cortez. It can make them vote for the expansion of ICE. It can make them vote for the bankruptcy bill and Ilhan Omar. It can make all of them bend to the will of imperialism, militarism, and materialism. Period. This is our fight. But we have no option but to win. There is no option but to win. We do this for the people who came before us. We do this for the people who will come after us. We have to move as if we only have a responsibility to our ancestors and the unborn. That is literally what we have to do. There's no other option. You know how Doctor Strange says we're in the end game? Well, Thanos is here. So what we gonna do? What we gonna do? This is the decade that you can either look yourself in the mirror 10 years from now and say, yo, I did everything I could and I just gotta live with the result. Or you gotta look your son, you gotta look your daughter, you gotta look yourself in the mirror and say, I didn't do as much as I could have. And will you be able to live with yourself if you know that you could have made even just the smallest change, even just the smallest commitment, even just the smallest action? Who are you going to be in the 2020s, black man? Who are you going to be in the 2020s, workers? Who are you going to be in the 2020s, revolutionaries? Who are you going to be in the 2020s, proletarians? Are you going to turn up? Or are you going to be laid down by the powers that be? The choice is yours. The choice is ours. The power is ours to take. The economy runs on our consumption, our production. It does not run on the ideas of evil men who dream up wars for young men and women to go and die for. It's our struggle, it's our fight, it's one people. For all my Africans, Pan-Africanism is our path. We have to support all of our people. For all the workers, socialism is our path. That is how we win. We have to start reading Marx. We have to start reading Angela Davis. We have to read Fanon. We have to read Huey P. Newton. We have to read. We have to engage. We have to go to the communities that you too scared to go to. You have to go to the communities that you think that you too above because that's not where the real fight is. It's in the academic halls, or, oh, it's in the conference halls, or, oh, it's at this table for this plate that's worth $500 to talk to this governor. That's not where the fight is. The fight is in our communities. The fight is on the ground. The fight is in the book. The fight is in the study group. The fight is in the organizing. The fight is in just taking that little $3 of, change that you get every week and just giving it to somebody that you see who needs it every time you see them. That's a repeated behavior. We have to be understanding of our disability activists. We have to be listening to our indigenous peoples. We have to be listening to our Asian American peoples. We have to be listening to even our poor white working class folks. We even have to be listening to them to an extent. We have to listen to all of the workers, all colonized people, all oppressed people, because it is us versus the capitalists, us versus imperialism, us versus climate change, us versus the powers that be. It is us, the people, the people, the people. Understand that. Look at yourself in the mirror and say, worker, let's do this shit.
What's up, Ben? This is Brian. I wanted to say what's up to everyone listening right now. Any leftist or progressive, whether you're in the Democratic Party or if you're an independent such as myself. I just wanted to give my opinion on everything that has transpired in recent days and weeks especially specifically Bernie Sanders dropping out of the presidential race, or at least suspending his campaign, not completely dropping out. But this is something that I have been expecting since Super Tuesday, because after Super Tuesday, the writing was pretty much on the wall. I know he had a very slim chance the week after that, but it was clear to me that progressives won the battle of ideas, but we lost the war of ideology. Okay, and what I mean by that is, of course, we know that ideology is a system of ideas and ideals. So how can we win the battle of ideas but lose the war of ideology? And that's because people believe in progressive ideas, which is why Bernie Sanders, if you look at the exit polls, our ideas are popular within a majority of the party. But people are wedded to the old system, which is the ideology part. That's the ideological part. And that old system is centrism. So it's like people know that what we're saying is the right thing to do, but because of their belief in centrism and neoliberalism within the Democratic Party, and for some people, really taking it personally, that this idea that the Democratic Party is somehow doing something wrong or in the wrong, or that the Democratic establishment is not doing right by the people. Some people really took that to heart and really took that personally when that's not really something that can be really argued and debunked. It's just that people just didn't want to hear the truth. And honestly, it was also a lot of fear involved as well. And it doesn't hurt the centrist cause for the media to pump millions of dollars in the airtime, propping up Joe Biden. So, it was always going to be an uphill battle. Because we are up against the entire establishment. We're up against the military establishment. We're up against many of whom are in the media. We're up against the media establishment, and we're up against the political establishment. We're up against the banks. We're up against the donor class. Like everyone, quite literally, everyone wanted to see us fail, but us. Okay. And with all of that in mind, I think the fact that we were still able to win the battle of ideas is a big deal. I think that the generational divide within the Democratic Party and, on the left, at least, left of center, not necessarily leftist, but left of center, to include everyone on the left, including people within the Democratic Party. I think that there's a major generational divide that the 2020 election exposed. And I think it's very deep seated. I think because so many older voters, decided to maintain the status quo instead of, pushing the envelope because it's safer to them. Not necessarily, it's not helping us at all, but it's safer to them. And that's really what their frame of reference is right now. I think that's created a tremendous amount of disdain between the generations. And I think you see that online. You see it on Twitter. You see it on Facebook. There's a major disagreement, generationally between the youth and just people under 45 in general, and elders, who have a very antiquated view of the United States and of the world that it's just not palpable anymore. It's not real anymore. And I don't think some of these people have been able to pivot ideologically speaking. Which is going back to that war of ideology. I think a lot of them are still ideologically wedded to the old way of doing things that just doesn't work anymore. And it's provably ineffective. I don't know, I'm disappointed because if we want a better society, we have to actually believe that it's possible. If we continue election cycle after election cycle after election cycle to buy into beliefs that, oh, well, we need to keep pushing change down the road. We need to keep kicking the can down the road on change and just not actually fighting for what we believe in, then we're never actually going to have change. It's never actually going to happen, because people aren't actually believing that it's possible. And I don't think a lot of people consciously are aware of that. I think that's really honestly, a little too abstract for the average person. I think you really have to be honed in on your mental faculties and the way that you process information to really understand that. Change begins from within. And some of us understand that. Some of us on the left get that, which is why we were supporting Bernie Sanders. But a lot of people just don't. And I think it reflects that fundamentally, we just don't think like a lot of our parents and grandparents. There's a major disconnect in the way we process information versus how they process information. And I think it's being exposed in politics. But I'm not going to, hold up too much of the airwaves and too much of the time. I just wanted to share a little bit of that information. Honestly, I just also want to let Bernie Sanders supporters know that, this isn't the end. This isn't over, of course, but, you have every right to want to disengage. I don't think that is an irrational or unfair opinion to have after really all of us have sat through months of lies and distortions of our policy beliefs and of our positions. And we're being gaslit right now by people as well. And just the insane amount of disingenuous arguments that are being pumped out there. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of information to try to process and deal with. And so if, like Ben has said numerous times, if you need to check out for a little while, go ahead and do that. And I don't know what I'm going to do in 2020. Biden is clearly better than Trump, but he's marginally better. And right now we don't need a marginally better president. We need a leader. We need a true person we need somebody who's actually going to be in there and represent working people instead of representing corporations and the donor class. People don't get this. This is really the major source of all of our issues. We don't actually have people in power who give a damn about us, quite frankly. Which is why to many of us continuing to go along with the status quo, is tantamount to lunacy for a lot of us. It makes absolutely no sense. But this is where we're at right now. So, do what you have to do. And we're just going to have to figure out how we're going to move forward. But many of us are aware that we don't have another 4 to 8 years to waste.
All right. With the voice that I have left, I want to make sure that you connect with these two gentlemen, who have helped me out with today's show. Check out Brian. He is on Twitter @_Black Intellect, @_Black Intellect, and he has a new book out that I'm interested in getting. It's he's describing it as an Afrofuturist solar punk sci-fi book, and the title of it is Farima, Farima, by Brian Lewis. Check that out, and also be sure to check out the podcast from Q. He's on Twitter @Q Got No Rings. That's QGOTNORINGS. And his podcast is called The Fragment Podcast. So be sure to check both of those fellas out. That's all the voice I have time for today. And I have a couple more guests that are coming this week. I'm going to ease my way back into speaking on a regular basis. Thanks so much for supporting the show. Thanks to all of our patrons for making the show happen. Stay up, man. Stay encouraged. Stay encouraged. It's the best thing that I can tell you to do. We weren't in this for any games. We weren't in this for political positions. We weren't in this for money. I'm just now able to pay all. Most of us sacrificed a lot to be in this. Most of us sacrificed a lot to be in this. I'm one of those. I sacrificed a lot to be in this conversation because this conversation is that important. And so we weren't in this for positions. We weren't in this for games. We weren't in this for money. We were in this because we believe in what we're fighting for. And people like you and I, no matter how discouraged we may be, we always come back to the fight. So I'll see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.